Hi,
Hello,
it's Jackie Dukes.
and Spring.
We're so excited to welcome you today. We're talking about something that gets everyone super geeked out, boundaries. Isn't that fun? It's so fun to talk about boundaries versus walls. We're going to be kind of unpacking that. And I want to start by asking the question, who else out there sometimes feels bad about setting boundaries? Me. That is sometimes an indicator that there is a legitimate boundary that needs to be set, right? So I'm going to read a quote from the famous Dr. Cloud. He is amazing. Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend they go hand in hand. They're like the famous authors of the Boundary series. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend getting it. It will just unpack this and take it all to another level. But I want to start off with his words of wisdom, which is, we can't manipulate people into swallowing our boundaries by sugarcoating them. Boundaries are a litmus test for the quality of our relationships. Those people in our lives who can respect our boundaries will love our wills, our opinions, and our separateness. Those who can't respect our boundaries are actually telling us that they don't love our no's. They only love our yeses, our compliance. I only like it when you do what I want. Ooh. That kind of gives me the courage to be like, I can set boundaries, I can do it.
Yes. So for the next month, please join us for this whole series of boundaries versus walls. This week, we are focusing on self. So healthy boundaries that we can set for ourselves. Next week, we will be working on boundaries with relationships, our inner circle, family, and people that are around us every day or regularly. And then the next week, we will be focusing on workplace boundaries and healthy interactions. And then the following week, we'll be doing parenting. So we are really excited to kind of unpack all of this stuff and help you learn how to set boundaries and kind of break down walls and have healthy interactions with yourself and those that you have in your life.
Yeah. A lot of times, you think boundaries it's easy to kind of see boundaries as being holding you back or, keeping someone out, which boundaries are actually the doorway to freedom, right? We can't say yes to everything. And so knowing what is like this beautiful space for me to thrive and live, what does that look like? And sometimes we have to unlearn a lot of things before we can put those healthy boundaries in place. It's a journey. It's not like a one-day fix-all. That's why we want to have this conversation. We want to unpack it. One of the things that we kind of want to zone in on when we're talking about boundaries versus walls for ourselves is kind of taking an inventory of our thought life, right? So, and seeing how boundaries can be a response. I'm going to respond versus walls being reactionary. And that's a really helpful way to have language around when something happens. Am I triggered right now and then I'm reacting? Or something happens and okay, I have self-control. I step back, I survey the scenes, I take an inventory, and I, through assessing the situation, make a healthy choice for myself to promote future health. So we're gonna have some conversations about what that looks like. But triggers are a good indicator that we're either gonna be prone to react, right? Or we're gonna have an invitation to create and or honor a healthy boundary.
Yes. So I like to look at boundaries as creating a safe space to cope with the way that I feel. Whereas a wall is really creating space between your feelings and your ability to cope.
That's really true. And it's scary. It's scary to create space to process unpleasant emotions,
Yes,
right? Like
absolutely.
That's not fun. No one says, I feel like doing that today.
Right.
But that's what you're talking about. Boundaries are the pathway
Yes.
to true freedom. And
Yes.
so there is a beautiful place for sitting and unpacking unhealthy emotions in order to interpret them to create future health.
Yes. And one thing that came to my mind this week was having a positive mindset does not omit the struggle. It is an exercise used to overcome it. So when we think about setting boundaries for ourselves, we kind of give ourselves some grace when we think about it that way. Setting walls is when we create space between our feelings and our ability to cope. So it's helpful to give yourself the grace and the space to learn how to cope with those feelings, acknowledging them when they come up, even if they come up in the form of a trigger. Looking at triggers is a healthy thing to do. Acknowledging that you're triggered by something, by a thought or feeling or emotion or memory, and then learning how to deal with that and realizing this is something that I need to process, this is something that I need to move on from. Avoiding them when we put walls up doesn't give us the space to grow. It doesn't give us the space to heal, and it causes us to prolong our unhealthy state of mind.
That's so true. Walls oftentimes are when we're living in the fight or flight or freeze stage. So it's that trigger, and when we react to it, we keep ourselves in this unhealthy circle, right? We're not finishing the stress cycle. And a lot of times a good indication, besides, knowing, maybe if you're not aware of your triggers, if you feel like this overwhelming need to either self-protect or in panic, that fight or flight, or to punish, because you're angry to harm. Like that's like the knee jerk, that's the reaction versus I've taken inventory of what my triggers are. I need space to heal and grow. So I'm going to put this beautiful white picket fence up around my circumstances and my choices to give myself that space. Then there's a gate, right? The wall, nobody's getting over, but the gate lets the healthy people in and keeps the unhealthy people out. And that can be in different scenarios of our life as well, not just somebody as a whole.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I think, kind of going off the fight or flight mode is survival mode. When you are in survival mode, you do what needs to be done because you're the only one that's going to do it. Or you can only rely on yourself to do that. But that is a very lonely place to be. You have walls up everywhere, all the way around there. Like she said, no one can get over the wall. That is a very lonely place to go. And you don't want to create this space for yourself where you feel like you can't process anything because it hurts too much or because that takes away time from getting done what needs to be done. You want to create this sense of relief for yourself. And the ultimate goal is to find peace within yourself. So it's important to take small steps every day that lead you to peace. One thing I had to learn myself was to literally ask myself, every opportunity I had, no matter how big or small the feeling was, or the circumstance or situation, or particular day even, was, does this choice lead me in the direction of peace? And for me, I lived in the gray area for a long time, and then I had to realize how to separate the gray into black and white. And to move forward with which direction I wanted to go in. And it was easy for me to kind of cope and sort out my thoughts when I was able to break that down into black and white. Does this go in the direction of peace, which is where I want to be? Yes or no? If it did not, then I processed it, I dealt with it, and I moved on from it. And if it did, then I knew that I had gone through a period of growth in that area. So that was something that really, really helped me kind of grow through that struggle.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. We've kind of hinted several times about taking inventory. That's a forever thing, is taking this, like loving ourselves well, taking the time to say, That's what we want to encourage you to do. And I'm like, I need to do a fresh inventory, you know?
Well, it's renewing your mind.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah. What are your needs? Way beyond that, what are your desires?
Yes.
And then what are your triggers? So, and then just looking at the landscape around it, like, these are my needs. Like, just put a few of your top needs. Are there healthy boundaries surrounding these needs getting met? Prioritizing these needs. Like, what are your top 2 needs? What are your top 2 desires? And then what are your top 2 triggers? Okay, so if I know these are my top 2 triggers, then I'm going to be tempted to put walls up. Boop. Whenever these things happen. So what are my healthy choices, my healthy boundaries that I want to put? And this is the whole boundary versus walls for ourselves, right? So before we start interacting with those out there, we need to take this inventory. We need to take the time to love ourselves well and know these are my needs that are worth protecting, to create a plan of healthy boundaries for. So because other people are not responsible for knowing what your needs are. Other people are not responsible for knowing what your desires are. Other people are not responsible for knowing what your triggers are. That is how we show up for love, is to take the time to love ourselves well, and vice versa. It's not our responsibility to know what other people's needs, desires, and triggers are. That is what's so beautiful about relationships. We have those conversations.
Yes.
So,
but what is our responsibility is our own thoughts, our own words, and our own actions.
That's right.
And when we start with our thoughts and we deal with those things that are deep inside of us, even all the way back from childhood, we have the ability to start healing ourselves. So that leads to healthy thoughts. Our thoughts are what we speak, and our actions are based on what we say and think. So it all goes together. But one thing that I want to bring up is, and touch on what you said, was knowing what our desires are. The desires of your heart were planted there with a purpose. There's a reason why you have specific desires in your heart. And when you start clearing out your mind and renewing your mind and sorting through your pains and your struggles and the things that make up all of your thoughts, you can kind of start to see what those desires of your heart are. They become more clear as the fog lifts, as you kind of sweep away and deal with each thought as it comes up, or each trigger. Everything else becomes more clear. And the reason that you have specific desires in your heart is because they go along with your purpose. And something that is kind of hard to deal with when you have been in the fog, or you have never really dealt with your struggles, you've just kind of swept them, and you've placed these walls, is it's hard to know what your purpose is. It's hard to know which direction to even say that yes or no to.
Yeah.
But when you give yourself the space to kind of see your heart and tune into what those desires are, then you can kind of look out into the future and say, okay, this is what I desire to do. This is how I desire to feel. And then those are what you set as your goals, like what you're saying. And that's what you learn to work towards.
Yes.
So it's
because
really,
you can't set a priority around a direction you don't know that you're going in.
Exactly.
Right. So that's what a boundary is. It's this beautiful orbit that protects a desire, a need, and a goal. It's a planned course of love.
Right.
I think that's beautiful. I like that.
So just to recap, a boundary is when you identify your feelings, acknowledge them, and act upon them, whether that's to heal, process, whatever it is you feel you need to do.
Yeah.
And then a wall is when you decide that you're going to avoid that feeling, avoid that memory, and not act upon it. You're just going to totally dismiss it and move on. That is an example of what you do in survival mode.
Right.
Fight or flight is more like responding versus reacting.
Definitely. We definitely want to live in a posture that is responsive or responding in wisdom and health, so we can actually meet the desires of our hearts, the needs and the goals of our lives. And we can step into our purpose and enjoy who we are. And I want to speak to whoever out there feels the need to make everyone happy and is tempted to have no boundaries, so that you can, you've set your purpose as, my purpose is to make everyone happy, and I'm trying to avoid the, pain. The truth is, we cease to exist if we only exist to make others happy. So if we truly love people, then we stand up, we rise, and we shine. And then those that are shining with us will be attracted to the same stars in the orbit. But for those that don't like our no's, I want to encourage you that it is okay to not be everybody's cup of tea. That's like a really hard lesson that I learned, and I'm still learning. I'm constantly coaching myself on this. So I want to read a cute little, you don't have to be everybody's cup of tea, snippet that it's so encouraging to me. The world is filled with people who, no matter what you do, no matter what you try, will simply not like you. That's so hard. That stings even saying, I'm like, but you know what? That's liberating,
yes.
Right? But the world is also filled with those who will love you fiercely. The ones who love you, they are your people. Don't waste your finite time and heart trying to convince the people who aren't your people that you have value. They will miss it completely. They won't buy what you're selling, so don't try to convince them to walk your path with you, because you will only waste your time and your emotional good health. You are not for them, and they are not for you, and that's okay. You are not their cup of tea, and they are not yours. Politely wave them along as you move away as well. Seek to share your path with those who recognize and appreciate your gifts, who you are. Be who you are. You are not everybody's cup of tea, and that is okay.
Yes.
I just love that. It's liberating because we love everyone. We accept everyone's differences, but there is freedom in realizing healthy relationships does not equal pouring yourself out to where you have a mental breakdown to make those around you happy. That's not health. And I think it's what we're talking about, knowing what your desires are so you know how to chart your course. Yes. Knowing what unhealthy looks like is important too. Like, oh, nope, not heading in that direction.
Absolutely.
And I'm okay with not being everybody's cup of tea. Because as soon as we start messing with our flavor, we actually lose our unique, spunk. So learning to to be able to have boundaries means we have to learn to self-love first. So that's, it's not an overnight thing. It's this process. And a big part of it is identifying our needs, our desires, and our triggers. Because if something triggers us, it means something's important to us, right? And so going on this journey of self-discovery is a scary, beautiful, wonderful thing. So let's go on this adventure together.
Yes. We're very, very excited to be doing this series with you, and we hope that everything that we say and share is able to resonate with you, or you take the pieces that do resonate with you and that you can apply them and that they help. And if you know someone in your life who needs this message or these coming messages, we invite you to invite them along this journey with us. We are here to be that support system if you don't have one, and we're also here to help teach you how to be a support system to those that you love, including yourself.
Yes. We would love for you to share with us, when you go through your inventory of self-love, what your 2 needs are, like your top 2, what your 2 top desires are. And maybe if you're willing to be brave, tell us your top 2 triggers. I would love to be able to be trusted with that, that information. And then next week, we're going to be talking about boundaries versus walls in your inner circle. So whether that's best friends, family, romantic, those people who are in your circle. So can't wait to unpack that.
Yes.
All right. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.